morning, everyone. We are in Numbers chapter 16. I would almost say we've been camping out in the book of Numbers, but that would just sound like too bad of a pun to use. And so, but we're working here with these Israelites, right, that had made these encampments in and around the tabernacle while they're now going to have to wait a while, right? And they've been right there at the doorstep. God's led them in a way that brought them into peaceful means by which to ultimately prepare to go take the promised land. Sent some spies into the land to kind of scout out what it looked like and where the cities were and where the people were. But those men decided that beyond just scouting it out, God had the right to tell the people whether or not they should go take the land. And 10 of them convinced the congregation that it was just an impossibility, and why in the world did we come out here in the wilderness to die, and brought that evil report up. The congregation followed suit. God wasn't very happy with them, right? And he decides that he's just going to do what with them? Yeah, just going to wipe them out. Let's just take them out. And tells Moses, I can make an even greater nation than these people ever were through you. And so Moses intervenes, right? And he challenges in some ways, and I shouldn't say challenge, but he has a discussion with Jehovah about maybe it wouldn't be the wisest thing for him to destroy them as one man. Maybe he should allow them to survive, at least in part. And so God devises a different plan. He says over 40 years they're going to wander in the wilderness. He's going to let that generation die, what we might call naturally, right? He's going to let that generation just kind of go away, and then he'll bring the next generation into the promised land. And the very ones that they thought they were protecting, the children and those that were vulnerable, are actually going to be the ones that receive the promised land. Then he begins to give them instructions and rules, right? Certain sacrifices, how are we going to handle sins of ignorance and that kind of thing. And you've got time now beginning to build as they begin to move forward. So they still have to be governed, though. And they still have to know how to survive and live as a nation of people while they're waiting for the opportunity to eventually get into the promised land. And so you've got all of these things happening as it relates to this history that unfolds here in the book of Numbers. And we're going to deal with yet another rebellion with Korah here in Numbers chapter 16 in just a moment. But before we further our study and get back into that discussion, if you would, let's take a moment, bow our heads together. We'll share in a word of prayer before we get back into our discussion of this scene here in Numbers chapter 16. Our Father in heaven, thank you for the day that you blessed us with, an opportunity to assemble here and to appreciate the testimony of your word and this great history of your people. The lessons we can learn by understanding how you dealt with your people and how you handled both the things when they were honoring you and how you handled the consequential side when they rebelled against you. Give us a heart that wants to be receptive and understanding of that, and to want to honor you and to serve you and to give you the best of our lives every day. Strengthen us in our study this morning. Encourage us as we strive to appreciate this testimony, and we pray all these things through thy Son's name. Amen. All right, so who is this Korah that we're about to talk about? Well, it's right there, by the way. Not trying to trick you. Okay, he's part of this Levitical system. Who are the Kohathites? That's important. That's right. The Kohathites, if you remember, there were three particular groups. Some guys had to take care of the structure, right? They made sure the tent of the tabernacle and all the walls and stuff and all the poles and everything that was holding the walls up. Some folks had to do that, and others had certain responsibilities. These guys were responsible for the holy things, right? The Kohathites were the ones that were specifically chosen among the Levites to do a very special task, and that was to make sure the holy things of God within His tabernacle were cared for, because they're going to get up and move and get up and move and get up and move, and so they're going to have to be able to care for that. It's important to keep that in the back of your mind. So Korah is a leader among the Kohathites, and the Kohathites were the ones responsible for the holy things of God within the tabernacle. He raises up a little bit, we might say, of a rebellion. He goes outside of the Levitical system, right, in order to gain his influence. Who does he bring into the equation? There's two guys mentioned here. there's lots of names mentioned, but there's two individuals involved. Dathan and Abiram, right? And these men come from the sons of, and ultimately which tribe? Tribe of Reuben, right? Not the Levitical system. So these guys aren't living and residing in the inner circle of the tabernacle where the Levites were, right? These guys are living in the encampments. And so Korah has gone outside of the Levites, and he's built himself up a popularity among some folks from the tribe of Reuben. And they rise up before Moses and bring certain challenges. So the first question under this caption, and if you're looking at your lesson sheets, and so we're in lesson or part 2, it's Roman numeral 3, letter B, rebellion of Korah. And on the bottom of that sheet, it'll say page 10. Printed on the sheet, it'll say page 10. So the first question was, what sin then did Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and On commit? We didn't mention him in that list of guys. So what sin was it that they did? Okay, they went against Moses. Okay, so anytime the people or an individual, including like Miriam, when they would speak out against Moses, that was actually a direct affront to whom? To God, right? It wasn't just about Moses. It was always about God, because God had what with Moses? He had chosen him, right? Moses was God's selection. Moses was somebody that God determined was going to lead the people. It wasn't something that Moses determined on his own. In fact, Moses didn't even want to what? He didn't even want to do it. When he encounters God at the burning bush, if you recall, he begs him to not send him. He doesn't want to do it. You know, he tries to make up every excuse he can. I don't even know who am I supposed to tell him sent me when I get there. I don't talk so good, and so how's that going to work when I arrive there? And how am I going to communicate all these things? And Moses tried everything he could to get out of the responsibilities, but God said, no, I'm going to send you anyway. And I'll give you Aaron. So Aaron's working side by side. But these challenges that these folks are bringing are against the authority of Moses that was granted unto him by Jehovah himself. And these Kohathites had been given a very special privilege, right? To be able to this honor of being able to handle the holy things of God within the tabernacle and to honor that responsibility. And we'll see that as important in this conversation moving forward. So they gather themselves around, and they're challenging Moses in this situation. Question 2 asked, how did God take care of the rebellion of these evil men? Now, I'll give you a chance to give me a summary answer to that if you'd like, and then we'll break it down. Okay, so eventually they're going to what? They're going to die. Right? Eventually the consequential end of this is, if you want to just jump straight to the end of it, a lot of people are going to lose their lives because of this rebellion and the rebellious attitude of the people. That's the ultimate consequence of this rebellion. But God does it in front of whom? Yeah, right? So the congregations, people are going to know about how God handled this rebellion. And I think we can't lose sight of that throughout all these situations, because if they don't learn, they won't get any better. And the truth of the matter is, over their history, they have periods where they learn and get better, and then they go right back to rebellion. And then they learn and get better. In fact, even, I'm fast forwarding too much, but even at the end of this one, they don't get it. Right? Even at the end of this situation, who do they blame? They blame Moses. We'll get there before we're done this morning. So let's think about this. I want you to start in verse 7 with me. And I'm going to bounce a little bit. I'm not going to read all this text, but I want to bounce around through the chapter a little bit with you and just get the picture of what's happening in this history. Start in verse 7. So this rebellious spirit, right? Korah and these guys come to Moses. You're not really in charge. You shouldn't be responsible over this. You've taken way too much authority into your hands. We can be just as responsible. And they even say, look, the people were what? What's the word used about them? If you go back in the text. I think I heard it maybe. They said the congregation's holy, right? Congregation's holy. And it isn't about you, Moses, anymore. You're claiming all this authority. The congregation's doing fine. People are doing fine. You need to relent on some of this and let us have some of this authority that you keep mandating over us as the disposition. So Moses says, all right, if you want to decide who's in charge and who God has chosen for particular purposes, He's already given you the responsibilities over the holy things. If you want to take over everything, let's just see. And so Moses says, get your censers, right? Bring your guys up here to the tabernacle and let's just present before God and let's see what happens at the end of that process. Put fire there in verse 7 and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth choose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. I thought that was important because that's what they accused Moses of, right? You take too much upon you. You're embracing too much of this authority. Moses just throws it back at him in verse 7. He says, no. Right? No. God chose the role and purpose I'm fulfilling. God chose the role and purpose you're fulfilling. I haven't taken on more than I should. You're trying to take on more than you should, but let's let God decide. And that's what I appreciate that about Moses here. He just doesn't try to get his own crowd of people around him and get in an argument with them. He says, let's just let God decide. And put your fire and your incense together, and let's go before God and see what happens. And he says to Korah in verse 8, here I pray you, you sons of Levi, seemeth it but a small thing unto you, that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to Himself to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord. That's what we've been talking about with those Kohathites. And to stand before the congregation to minister unto them. And He hath brought thee near to Him and all thy brethren, the sons of Levi, with thee. And seek ye the priesthood also. God's given you all of these things. And He's given you all of this privilege. And you're not satisfied. It's interesting, right? Because that seems to be the going problem among the Israelites continually. Is they're never content. They're not content with the water they get. They're not content with the food they get. They're not content with the path they're taking. They're not content with any of those things that happen in relationship to those purposes. So we need to appreciate here that Korah is going to have to learn a lesson. And all of those that have been hanging out there with him are going to have to appreciate this message as well. Notice with me verse 13. Jump down. He says, is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? This is their attitude. Is this such a small thing to you? He says, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us? You've already brought us out here in the wilderness to die, Moses. Now you want to be prince and king over us as well? Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth, here it goes, right? What had happened? They rebelled, they complained, and wanted to go back to Egypt. Yep. Then they're told, guess what? You just lost the promised land. I'm going to wait this generation out and bring it to the next generation. Then what'd they try to do? They tried to go anyway. Oh, we're sorry. Now they want to go. And as soon as they did, they were what? They were smitten and driven right back out. Okay? So now their whole disposition is, you brought us here. You brought us to a land that flows with me. We haven't seen any of it, right? You haven't given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. He asked for these other men to come see him. Korah's right there, right? He's right there because he's a Levite. But these other men, Moses has called for them, and they're like, we're not coming. You're going to be a prince over us? We're not listening to you. You brought us out here to die. We didn't get any of the things you told us we were going to get when we left Egypt. None of that's happened. We're not coming. Moses was pretty upset about it, verse 15. He says unto the Lord, respect not thou their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, neither have I hurt one of them. I haven't hurt any of them. I understand why they're upset with me. I don't understand why they're so frustrated with all these things. I haven't done anything to bring challenge unto them. So they begin to this process then. They bring their censers and the incense, and they're going to do this test that God had set before them through Moses. And we're just going to see, right, whether or not these things are going to happen. Now, keep in mind, I'm fast forwarding a little bit because I want to read all this text. Hopefully you're reading these things at home. But, so they won't come down to Moses, so what's Moses do? He and Korah go to them, right? He and Korah go up to them at the tents. They go there. And so while they finally get there, and you've got this whole scene unfolding, and Moses speaks to them, verse 24, let's pick up there. He spoke unto the congregation, saying, Get up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. Why? Think about this with me for a minute. Why is it important for Moses to do that? What's he doing there with everybody that's present? He's giving them what? Yeah, he's giving them a choice. Listen, I'm telling you, this isn't going to go well, right? Moses says, I don't want any of you consumed. The wrath of God is coming. You make a decision. You've been warned, you've been told, you need to get away from these men. You need to get away from these tents. You need to get away from these guys as fast as you can, because consequence is coming. To me, that's important, because you might see this scene and think, oh, how horrible is God, right? That he would bring such destruction. And here in a moment, the whole earth is going to what around these tents? Yeah, the earth is just going to open up and swallow them, the text says. And that may feel like harshness, right? But it is, and it's consequential, and it's devastating. But they chose it. They chose it. You know, we don't see the same literal, instantaneous kinds of things today. And some say, well, how could God punish anyone? How could God bring consequence to anyone? Why is that? Well, the truth is we choose it. By our decision making and how we view what God has instructed us and given us commands, and we make a choice whether we'll honor Him, appreciate Him, seek the opportunities for hope and salvation in Him, or He outlines for us the other side of that, and we've got to make choices. And in this scene here in Numbers, he says, listen, you guys need to get away from here, because bad things are about to happen. And by the way, some of them what? Some of them listened. Verse 27. So they got up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan and Abiram on the every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their children. I don't know this to be true. I'm just trying to give you a visual. But I imagine in my mind, here they come, right? And they stand outside their tents and they give it this. Right? We're not going anywhere. We don't believe you, Moses. We don't think anything's going to happen. And what's the saddest part of that scene? Yeah, they drug their families right in there with them. It's an interesting topic, and I'll chase the rabbit, for a minute here with you. But the sins of the sin, and by that what I mean is the eternally condemning sin of the parents is not transcribed or born in or moved over to the children. These children here aren't bearing the eternal consequence of the decision of their parents. But they most certainly are caught up in what? In the physical, earthly moment consequences of the choices and sins of their parents, and that has been happening since man has chosen sin. Where innocent people, including at times even children, get caught up, not eternally consequential for them, but they get caught up in the earthly choices of those who should be protecting them, and those who should be guiding them better and providing for them better and doing the right things for them in better ways. And it's sad to think about the fact that that hasn't changed. There are still children and other innocent people getting caught up in the wash of the bad behaviors of the adults and others around them. And it happens here. It's sad that these men are so obstinate and so stubborn and so determined in their own thinkings, their egos, whatever it is, their pride, their lack of belief. I don't know what exactly might be motivating them here in every characteristic, but all I know is their obstinance is not going to just be a problem for them. It's going to create problems for others. And fortunately enough, some of those who had gathered in and around them got smart enough to get away from that scene. But these men now have drugged their families right down into the quagmire of this situation. And so Moses tells them, you're about to understand how God is working here. And he makes an interesting statement in verse 29. He says, if these men die the common death of all men, in other words, if nothing happens here, and these guys go on to live normal lives and die natural causes, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. Moses says, I'm willing to let God decide here. I'm willing to let God show whether or not He is with me or not with me. If these men live, then you'll know God hasn't really sent me, and you might as well start gathering yourself up some leaders and head on back to Egypt if that's what you want to do. But if God does bring judgment towards these folks, then that's a different story. If the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up, verse 30, with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. And it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder, and that was under them. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their good works. They and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. Now here's what's interesting about that. Korah doesn't what? In terms of where he lives. Does he live where these guys live? No, he didn't live there. Right? Moses told these guys, come on down here where we are. They said, nope. You don't have any right to tell us where we're supposed to arrive. So Moses gets those elders, Korah, they go up there. They go where those guys are, right? Korah has been the leader, and he has to witness what he caused. You think about that. He stands there and has to witness and watch as these families who followed him are swallowed up by the earth in this scene. We're not done with him. We'll get to him and his plight here in a moment. But just think about that issue. But we've got a whole other group of people, right? So the first thing was get you 250 guys, right? And they're gonna burn fire and incense back at the tabernacle. So you got these guys that were with Korah that were still around the tabernacle doing that instruction. Moses had gone off over here to deal with these other guys. They're now swallowed up. Now we got to come back and deal with these 250 that had been given a different responsibility. They're not swallowed up by the earth in that moment. Verse 34 tells us, though, when all Israel that were round about watched what happened and heard the cry of them, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up, we need to get away. We need to get away. And then verse 35. After that happens, then there came out a fire from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. Earth swallows up those folks outside the tabernacle area where they wouldn't come. They're swallowed up right where they were living. The 250 that had come to try to prove that Moses really didn't have all the authority and God was going to reign with them. Now God sends out a fire. You can only imagine how that might play out, and consumes those 250. And by the way, jump over to Numbers chapter 26 for a moment. When they recall this situation, it doesn't say it when it happens in Numbers chapter 16, but if you recall, when the history is recalled in Numbers 26, the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up together with Korah when that company died. What time the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a sign, notwithstanding the children of Korah died not. So he loses his life in the same moment that these things are happening. But it's interesting, though, his children what? So his children survive this. Why? That may, and not in a real deep, but just. Okay, maybe they're not in the picture. They're going to be what? They're going to be needed. They've got a very peculiar role to fulfill. In that, right? That family had been given the responsibility of the holy things at the tabernacle. And I guess, God could have decided to just wipe them out and give it to a different family. But it seems as though they survive it, so that responsibility can continue. But I just wanted you to know, though Korah is not mentioned in the original line, he is mentioned as losing his life in this scene here in Numbers chapter 26. Yeah, they have to watch all that. Hopefully they'll think twice. Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
Was the 70 men that was chosen included in this 250?
I would have no idea. We're not told who these men are.
They was called leaders in the community.
Yeah. I have no idea whether they would be, any of them would have chosen to be part of this or not. My mind thinks not. You would hope they would have stayed with the spirit of Moses that had been given to them. But I don't know that we're given any, to my knowledge, any indication of that. But it's an interesting question because you've got different. So it's obviously lots of men are kind of stepping up. And of course, you got a couple million people, you're going to have that, where people are going to start fulfilling various roles and maybe even usurping certain roles at times. So, who's brought involved here, verse 37? I thought this was kind of interesting to think about for a minute. Eleazar, who's he? That's one of Aaron's sons, right? That's one of Aaron's sons. And basically, what's the instruction given to him? What's he supposed to go do? Okay, so these 250 men are consumed by this fire that comes out from God, but the censers they took were tools and utensils that God intended for His purposes. So He tells Eleazar, go get those. And what's he supposed to do with them? Right? And notice verse 38. Let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar. For they offered them before the Lord, therefore they are hallowed. Not the men, the censers. Right? And they shall be a sign unto the children. So when they see these plates that are now going to be over top of the altar, hopefully the people will remember those plates were made from the censers that God had hallowed, that those 250 men had dishonored and lost their lives because of it. God does that a lot, by the way. He gives them things to remind them of various scenes and circumstances and situations that they encounter, and this is one more of those. Take those censers, make plates to go over top of the altar, and people will remember that. Those came from the censers. Quick question, why do you think he would have sent Eleazar? Why didn't Aaron just go do this? And that might be somewhat speculative, but I want you to think just for a minute. Well, I don't want to be overly crude here, but there's 250 what? And 250 what else? Dead bodies. You come in contact with dead body, what do you got to do? Yeah, you got to go purify. You got purification issues. If Aaron goes down there, now he's out of use for a period of time, right? He won't be able to fulfill his other responsibilities in the right ways. So he'll be out of use for a period of time. So it makes sense. Send Eleazar down. He can take care of that. Not speaking ill of Eleazar, but you won't miss him like you might miss Aaron. He can go through the purification process after coming in contact with all that, and it won't create such a problem like it would for Aaron. And I just thought that was an interesting way to think about that, as to why maybe God decided to send Eleazar down there instead of Aaron, because of the responsibility that it was going to take and what it would create in that moment. But we're not quite done. We can do this in 5 minutes. So it probably took them a little longer, but we can get through it in 5 minutes. So the next day, and the question in the lesson sheets was, how many people perished in God's righteous retribution in this latter stage? Let me back you up one question. What complaint did the people have against Moses in verse 41? You did this. We just witnessed families swallowed up by the earth. We just got 250 men consumed by a fire over here by the tabernacle. Moses, you did this. You did this. You've killed the people. Interestingly, you killed the people of the Lord. I don't know how these folks, and it's hard, right? How do these folks think that Moses would have had power outside of God to open the earth up? How did they think he would have had power outside of the Lord to send a fire that could instantaneously consume these 250 men who thought it was okay for them to rebel against Moses and God? And yet that was the conclusion they drew. You caused this. And so what's God send because of this complaint? He sends a plague. The sad reality is they witnessed all this and didn't yet learn anything. They haven't appreciated anything yet. These men said, you have usurped too much power. Now the congregation comes and says, you've used that power to kill people. Moses can't win. He's either doing too much in terms of taking and usurping authority, or he's used his authority too strongly to take these lives. And it's interesting, the plague comes, and who is it, though, that saves the people? It's Moses and Aaron. Verse 44, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, get you up from among this congregation, that I might consume them as in a moment. You begged me not to do that before, Moses, but I'm doing it this time. They fall upon their faces again. Moses says to Aaron, take a censer, put fire therein. Aaron has the right to do that, by the way. From off the altar, put on incense, go quickly unto the congregation, and make an atonement for them. For there is wrath going out from the Lord, and the plague is begun. So Aaron took as Moses commanded, ran into the midst of the congregation, and behold, the plague was begun among the people. And he put on incense and made an atonement for the people, and he stood between the dead and the living. It's interesting, isn't it? A barrier between those who had died and the living, in order that they might be able to survive. And now they that died, and this was your question, how many of them was it? 14,700 of them. Now that's a lot of people. Now keep in mind, you're still dealing with a couple million folks or more around these encampments. But still, that's a lot of people before Moses and Aaron finally get in between those who were dying in this plague and those that were living, and allowed them to survive. They just continued to strike out against Moses, and it just kept bringing more and more and more challenge. And that's the difficulty of that scene and the frustrations that went along with it. Last 2-second comments. That's about all we got left before the kids come up. Yeah.
Perish. And now almost 15,000 more perish because they still didn't get it.
Yeah, just not paying attention. Yep, not learning anything. All right, Lord willing, and we're gonna push the gas pedal down on chapters 17 through 19. Just warn you ahead. So between now and Wednesday, I would read clear through chapter 20. Because when we get into these roles and responsibilities of the priesthood, we're going to summarize them pretty quickly and move pretty rapidly through some of that. And so just be aware that we're gonna cover